I'm listening for a click event. Hi everybody, and welcome to another exciting edition of Boring JavaScript. I'm your host, the Virtual White, aka Mike Smith, and today we're going to be talking about the addEventListener. That's right, over 500 events are available to you within the browser implementation of JavaScript, and each and every single one of them can be accessed by using the addEventListener. Want to see how it works? Let's get to it. So to show you how addEventListener works, let's take a real-world example. I have a web page here, and let's just bring it up. That is a user login page, real simple. And I want to use the events to do some validation on this particular page here. For example, if the username is blank, I want to be able to produce an error message saying, hey, you got to type something in. If the password is blank, I want to be able to have some sort of error message that says, hey, the password is blank. Or if the password is less than 8 characters, say, hey, you got to have at least 8 characters. And finally, when I click on login, I want to redo the validations to make sure something freaky hasn't happened, or otherwise print out some sort of congratulatory message that says everything was okay. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use events on these particular DOM elements to be able to accomplish what I want to do. You want to see how that looks like? Let's flip back over to our code. This is our HTML. I'm not worried about it. Let's go to the JavaScript. I first of all have the variables connected to all the different DOM elements just to make my life a heck of a lot easier. Here are the addEventListeners. Now, the addEventListener itself is always attached to some object that generates an event. In this case, I have the username input, the password input, and the submit button. So any object that generates an event, you can add an addEventListener to it. So whether that's a DOM object, like in my particular cases, or if you had a WebRTC object or a video object or whatever, as long as it generates one of the 500 or so different events that are available within JavaScript, you can pop an addEventListener onto it and listen to it. Now, addEventListener itself takes 3 arguments, and the third one's optional. I'm just using the first 2. The first one is extraordinarily important, just as important as the second one, and it is the type of event. All the type of events are enumerated lists that are always strings that specifies what event has been fired. For instance, on a DOM element, we might have a change event. You can even have a click event. You can have what's called a blur event, a focus event, a whole bunch of different events that could occur on a particular DOM element. In this case, I want to take a look at the change event. The change event says that when the value of the input, and this is a change event that's applied just to inputs, when the value of the input has changed, fire off the event. So if I had ABC in my input and I changed it to XYZ and I got out of focus on that particular DOM element, the change event will occur. So the idea here is that the element gets focus, you make a change to the value. As soon as it leaves focus, you tab over to another field, for example, the change event will occur. And so I've got that for both username and password. The second argument is the function that will be executed. And this basically means that, hey, I've got a change event. What function do you want to execute to do whatever code you want to do for your app? And you say, hop, here it is. So for instance, let's take a look at validate username as our example here. Here's our validate username function. It gets past one argument, and that is the event that JavaScript has generated. So a change event has occurred, or a click event, or whatever, and the JavaScript has generated an event object. And there's different supersets of that event object, a mouse event, a keyboard event, and so on and so forth. In my case, it's all going to be basically mouse and keyboard events. But that event object will contain information specific to that particular event. Now, in our case, we're really not using it at all right now. Well, I'll show you a little bit later on, another part of the video where we will be using some of the events. But just to let you know that that event object will get passed to your function. And in that function, you can do whatever you want to do. And in that case, I'm just, for instance, username here, I'm just going to check that, hey, if you got a blank username, I'm going to display an error and I'm going to return false. So for my validations, I'm going to return false if it was bad and true if it is good. So that's basically how the functions will work. So all three of the functions I have here, the change event for the password and the click event for the submit, which of course will fire once I click on the button itself, each one of them will always get that event passed over to it. So what's going to happen here? Well, the idea here is that once I've typed something inside username and it has changed, therefore I'm going to do the validate user event. And if it's invalid, which means if it's blank, it's going to display an error message. I'm going to type something in password, and as soon as I focus out of it, it's going to fire off the validate password event if the value has changed, and I'm going to check to make sure if it's blank or if it is less than 8 characters and display an error message as is. Then finally the click event will occur for the button, and once that occurs is I'm going to redo the validations just to make sure everything is okay, and if everything is okay, I'm going to show a little success message at the very end. And that's it. So this is basically a way you can validate. I'm going to validate when the value has changed, and I'm going to validate one more time when I click on login. Want to see how it works? Let's take a quick look. So let's go over to our browser. I'm going to do a refresh just to get everything ready to go here. So let's just do a successful one here. Here's my username. Doesn't really matter. Here's my password. It's got to be 8 characters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We'll put 10 of them in there. And we go over with our mouse and click on login. And hey, congratulations, you have logged in. So when I clicked on the login button, let's go back over to our code. What happened? Well, I clicked on the login. It got the submit event. I did event prevent default, which basically means that if the button had a default event, don't do it. Don't worry about that, but just something for cleaning out. I cleared out the error here. Now, we really didn't need to check the validations again. Actually, we did, but I'll show you that here in just a minute. But I just checked it one more time here. Here's the validate username. Here's the validate password. If either one of those fails, I would have gotten the error message, and it would print an error message. Otherwise, it did a show success, which is very basically just I have a little success message there. So what happens if we actually got errors? Well, let's flip back over to our browser. Let's do a refresh. Let's first of all see if there's no names or nothing in there. So let's tab down to login. Let's click on login, and we need to enter in a username. So I'm going to shift tab back to username, type in a username. Let's tab back out of password. Let's click on login. I need to enter in a password. So I go back to password and let's type in 4 characters. And I click on login. The password must be 8 characters long. So you can see here that every time I click on login, it does that validation for you for the username and password to make sure everything is okay. So if I go back now to password and make sure I type in 8 characters, I have now logged in. Now, what about the change event that occurs on each one of the inputs? Well, let's take a look at that. Let's go back. Let's refresh our screen. Let's just type something inside here. We know all of those are okay, so let's go back to the user event. The username has something typed in, and we change it to something else. Well, actually, just change it to blank, since blank's the only thing we're checking for. You need to enter in something as username. Now, why did that happen? Let's flip back to our code. The change event says that when the value has changed, fire off this validation. And the validation basically says if it's blank, then get an error message out there. So it worked exactly the way we're supposed to have worked. Let's go back to our browser. Let's now go back to our password, and let's blank that out. I need to enter in something as the password. Let's go to 2 characters. It must be at least 8 characters. If I go here, everything is okay. So that's a way you can use the change event to be able to do some online validations with the username and password, and the click event to be able to also do validations and to send the user whatever you want to do. But there is a problem with this. Let's refresh the screen. Now remember, I said the change event occurs once the value of the input element changes. But notice here, my username is blank and my password is blank. Shouldn't it have sent out an error message? Well, it didn't. And the reason that it didn't is because we're using the change event. The change event says that the value must change. Did the value change from the refresh to username or password? No, it stayed blank. So no change event fired. No change event fired, no validation occurred. So in reality, this particular login screen is incorrect. Well, in the next part of the video here, I'm going to show you a better way of doing the exact same thing and how to correct it, and show you how you can capture other types of events. So we really didn't get what we were looking for with the change event. Well, how can we fix it? Well, let's take a quick look at that. I've got another program here called Submit. And notice my username is expecting right now to have something typed in username because that's what has the focus. This happens to be Chrome, so that's how Chrome shows the focus. But I'm just going to tab out of it, go straight to password. And look at that, you need to enter in something username. So what happened? Well, let's tab again. Let's get out of password. Oh, you need to enter in something as a password. So now we're getting the results that we wanted to. We wanted to be able to say, hey, you need to enter in a username or you need to enter in use a password, even if the user just bypassed the field itself. How did we do that? Let's take a look at the code. It was done by just simply changing what event we're listening for. So instead of listening for change, we're now listening to an event called focus out. Now, DOM elements have a plethora of different events that get generated, and this just happens to be one of them. Change was one, this happens to be another one. What does focus out do? Well, focus out says that once the element has lost focus, fire off that event. So while change said, hey, if the value has changed, fire off the event. And as we found out very quickly, if we don't change the value by leaving it blank the first time through, we're not going to get that change event and we're not going to get the validation. But focus out says, you've lost focus. You've gone from username to password or from password to the login button. I'm going to fire off these events. So this is one way that you can take a look at all the different events that things like DOM elements generate, and you can do all kinds of things. If all you care about is changing the value, use the change event. If you want to do some sort of validation on it when the focus is lost, use the focus out event. And for instance, there's a focus in event in which you can now do things that when the focus goes into the event. So take a look at the documentation on the Mozilla Developer Network, because it's great, about all the different events that DOM events can fire. Now, the next thing I want to show you here is you can even fire off your own customized events. And I'm going to show you that to you next. So you have 500 or so events that JavaScript or browser implementations of JavaScript can generate. But did you know you can generate your own custom events? That's right. So for instance, let's go to my next page here. And this is called addEventListener for custom events. So the idea here is that we're going to create a custom event that when we click on the Click on Me button, this custom event is going to change this box from red to green. Yeah, right, this is a huge, giant, step for mankind, but it just shows you the example. So the idea here is that I'm going to show you how to create a custom event called Change to Green that will change the box from red to green. Let's take a look at our code. So I've got my addEventListener here for the Click Me DOM, and I've got an addEventListener called Change to Green. Now I can guarantee you, if you look up Change to Green on the JavaScript documentation on Mozilla or something like that, you will not find Change to Green. And the reason you won't find that is because Change to Green does not exist on any kind of DOM element, which I have here. So what gives? What did we do? Well, what we did is that we created a custom event. Let's take a look at the click event. The click event is going to a method called fire event, and that fire event is right here. This is where the magic's going to come in. We can create our own custom event, and I've got it highlighted right there, by issuing a new custom event. And it takes basically two arguments. The first argument is the name of the event. Now remember, earlier I said that each event has an enumerated list, JavaScript has an enumerated list of different events, and each of these events is a string. Click, focus in, focus out, change, whatever. All we're doing here is that we're now telling JavaScript, hey, guess what? We have our own customized event, and we're calling it Change to Green. Now, and that basically means that JavaScript's going to say, okay, you've now got an event called Change to Green. So whenever that event gets fired off, I'm going to send the Change to Green as the event type. The second argument is any kind of customized data we want to send to it. And all customized data is sent in the detail property of the customized event. And this data can be absolutely anything, a string, number, object, whatever, it doesn't really matter here. But the key here is that the custom event in JavaScript has a detail property, which is read-only, that will allow you to be able to pass data from your custom event over into the event when it gets fired off. Now, earlier I said you can capture any event on any element as long as that element generates the event. So we've got an addEventListener to our box DOM called change the green. Now we know that change the green does not exist on box DOM, so how do we get the event to occur on the DOM? Well, that's extraordinarily simple, and that's the next line down here. There is a method for objects called dispatch event, and dispatch event allows you to dispatch any type of event, whether it's your own custom event or any JavaScript event, onto a particular object. So in this case, on this object, this box DOM object, I am dispatching my own custom event. Does it have to be a custom event? No, it could be a JavaScript event. You want to do another mouse event? Go right ahead, doesn't really matter. But in this case, this is how you can do a custom event. Once we do this dispatch event, we've now told JavaScript that box DOM has a new event called change to green. And JavaScript's going to say, okay, box DOM, here's an event called change to green. Go for it. And our addEventListener, which has been sitting around snoozing around all day long trying to find it, suddenly says, oh, I've got a change to green event. So let's fire off the change to green function. We fire off the change to green function, and we just do whatever the heck we want to do. In this case, I'm changing it to green. Now, one thing I have done here is I have shown you, or I have a little extra section in here that kind of shows you, breaks down what's inside that event. So for instance, I'm going to print out a true or false whether that event was a custom event. The .type property tells me what type of event it was. That would be the click, change, focus out, focus in, or in my case, change to green. And then the detail is going to give me the event.detail. And this should say the word green. Let's take a look and see what happens. So let's go back over to our code, to our browser. I'm going to click on me. It should turn to green, and it does. And here's our custom event. Was it a custom event? Yes, it was. What was the type of event? The type was changed to green. And what was the detail? The detail was the word green. How do we know that? Well, the word green was what we passed to it in our detail when we created the custom event itself. So that shows you how you can create your own events. So you're not limited to everything that just JavaScript gives you. So if you wanted to have a bunch of fancy different events to do fancy different things that are specific to your application, you go right ahead. And it's all because of the custom event, new custom event object, and being able to dispatch the event itself. So that's how you can create custom events for your application. And that's all there is to the addEventListener. I hope you enjoyed our video. Hope it didn't bore you to death. Please check out all of our videos at www.boringjavascript.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, or check out everything that we do at blog.thevirtuoid.com. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you later.